The comp that you see is, well, do I even really have to explain it? It's poke slop, but I promise it isn't as boring as you think it is. There's a fair amount that goes into it, and if you know how to play it, you are one step closer to countering it. Today, we are going to learn how to perfectly utilize poke comps so that you can not only win with it, but make the meta slaves lose as you play against it. The main idea of poke compositions is to elongate the fight as long as you possibly can to allow for your DPS to shoot for as long as possible. Since poke compositions typically have long-range DPS like Hawkeye and Hela amongst others, the longer the fight goes on, the more shots that they can take, and eventually, even with the most suboptimal aim you have ever seen, eventually something is going to hit. That's just kind of how it goes. Shooting for a long time is only one part of the composition though. The other and way more complicated part of this poke composition is how you go about setting up and timing the angles you take as a team. If all you do is sit from main together and shoot the enemy shields, while it may break and you'll get some damage off, if the enemies are literally on top of you with a character like Bucky, you are going to have a very hard time winning the game. That's just facts. The issue is you can only deviate from your team so much before you are trolling and get picked off one way or another. Off-angling is when you are split away from your team but are one cooldown away from safety, whether that be a health pack or for your team, for example. Off-angling is really important as it splits up the lines of fire so that the enemy can only respond to one at a time, constantly allowing someone on the team to have free shots on the enemies to pressure them. But sometimes, even when you absolutely dunk on the enemy team, it just won't be enough and it will leave you pretty exhausted and tilted. Trust me, I've had a ton of games where I'm dropping upwards of 30 finals and I still lose. But that isn't a problem in this game that just added a ton of tools for you to kick back, relax, tilt and get back to it. That's right, for a limited time, you can now play as an assortment of different champions inspired by the classic tale Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Raid Shadow Legends, including Alice the Wanderer herself, the Cheshire Cat, Mad Hatter, Knave of Hearts, and the fearsome Queen of Hearts as well. Alice the Wanderer is a high damage legendary champion that excels at disrupting the enemy abilities, giving you enough time to take them down before they even get to play the game. And I know what you were all thinking. At first, I thought the same thing, but after logging a couple hours the last time we talked about Raid on the channel, I'll be real, I logged in a couple more, especially after some of the inevitably tilting games I get in ranked from season to season. Raid is the perfect game to forget about the game I just played, recollect myself, and get rewarded for actually doing so, which is something a lot of other AAA games right now just can't really do for me. Raid also has a surprising amount of content for being completely free to play, so there's always something that you can do that is worth your time. All players that sign up via the QR code or the link in the description will obtain the legendary Elenaril from the High Elves faction for free, with brand new players being able to pick one of the following legendary champions using the corresponding codes on screen. I'm going to pick the Cheshire Cat. It's a no-brainer. He looks absolutely sick and seems like he's absolutely gonna clear house. Now is the perfect time to hop into Raid with this boost to get you through the early game and get into stuff that you actually really want to get to. So if you haven't started playing yet, what are you waiting for? Click my link in the description or scan my QR code to get amazing bonuses available only via my link. Users will receive the legendary champion Elenaril and the epic Tagoar after reaching level 15. New players can pick one of the 4 promo codes on screen for a free legendary champion of their choice as well. Start playing Raid today, you will not regret it. Now back to the video. Take this position on Hela, for example, on high ground. While she isn't right with her team, she is far enough away that a shield can't easily block both hers and her team's damage at the same exact time. And if she gets dove or takes too many shots, she's just a bird away from a health pack. If another character is on the opposite high ground, it forces the enemies to have a very difficult time dodging both of their damage, creating a ticking time bomb where it is only a matter of time before the enemy team gets eliminated and they lose the fight. Now, when you see this position, all of you are probably thinking it looks pretty strong. However, understand that you aren't just going to get free picks right away. This is where players might get impatient and look to go alone on a flank, where a simple cooldown or rotation will not be enough to get back to the team. In the Hela situation, this could look like many different positions that are very risky, even if it might net you easier shots. While sometimes mixing things up and looking for a flank can be strong, especially when you are down in the fight, going for it by default every single fight will end up just getting you taken out. against better players, as they will set up to deny you and take you out as a result. Again, remember, the goal of the poke comp is to take shots over a long period of time, not necessarily eliminate the enemies as fast as possible. In order to take more shots, you have to be alive to do so. Sometimes taking a safe off angle just isn't enough though. Sometimes you need to go deeper into the enemy lines to get anything done. This is where splitting into groups as a team is extremely powerful to aid your DPS in winning their duels. Have you ever tried to take a 1v1 duel as Hela against an enemy Hela, only to lose because the enemy Hela has an invisible woman shield and you don't? It's genuinely unplayable. So as a Vanguard or a strategist player in poke compositions, it's very important that you actually think about taking space and setting up angles with your DPS in a way that will allow them to have the best chance possible to win the duels that they take. This is especially true the higher that you climb, since more players will support their teammates in this way against you. Take this situation on Symbiotic Surface, for example. Assuming you are playing on attack and are pushing the cart forward, you have two main options to go for. In option 1, you can take a hit scan like Hela or Phoenix on a deep flank, or support it to extend the safe space into it being just a safe off angle. If you remember, this was a very strong strategy when Ultron was broken, but it still could work if you send an invisible woman there as well. In option 2, it is way safer and doesn't need the help of an invis shield all the time, but rather a simple tank shield or bubble will do, especially since the DPS can swing with the right side of their body and utilize cover exceptionally well from that position. In more coordinated environments, you would actually really likely just take both of these options at the same exact time, with your invis and Hela going right and the rest of your team looking to either play on cart or, a couple on option 2. This forces the enemies to engage on one of the two targets, team 1 or team 2, and whichever team they choose is going to fall back while the other team can close in and look for a pick while that rotation between the two sub-teams happens. While it may seem really simple, I mean, guys, it really is. But the issue is that so many people in rank, they just kind of autopilot and stack 6 players in main, and they lose a lot for that. Like, guys, it happens a lot. In all of the coaching sessions I've done over the past year, it is almost a problem in every single game. Now, even though poke is very simple as a composition and execution, if the enemy doesn't react, what happens though if things go wrong and the enemy team does know what to do? What does that even look like? What can you guys do on other compositions to make it hard for poke? In the Brawl guide, we talked about how the Brawl composition has to run on high grounds and force people off of their angles, and that's going to dictate the fight that happens on point, and it's going to be a 6v6 Brawl, which then the Brawl team can win. Now, if you don't react to the Brawl trying to do this to you while you're playing the poke composition, you do just kind of lose the game there. Ideally, in these situations, your other DPS 2 in this picture, would be on a character like Moon Knight, Phoenix, or heck, maybe even Hawkeye, that would be able to do significant damage to a Brawl comp while they are rotating to your Hela that's on the other angle. This is safe for them to do against a Brawl composition, since it's very rare that a Brawl composition is ever going to have people split up and challenge that DPS 2 on that specific angle. However, this will be either really easy for the other DPS or really hard to pull off based on the map geometry and the way that the Brawl is rotating. On Yggdrasil path as seen, it can be pretty difficult to deal significant damage to the enemies on this rotation, which is why playing further back on the yellow safe area when the fight breaks out is still very strong and gives the enemies another angle that they have to path for, or else they lose the fight. In ranked, very rarely do teams play the way that they should be in Brawl compositions. Instead, they kind of just walk down main, making poke seem way stronger than it actually is from a meta to meta perspective. It makes characters like Moon Knight look really good, even though he is so incredibly easy to counter. Against dive though, things do get a little bit more complicated. Poke into dive is all about dismantling the engagement before it even happens by making it really difficult for enemies to jump onto you to begin with. More often than not, shooting tanks is actually a pretty good idea because it will make the length of the dive significantly shorter since they're going to have less health to work with. Just think about it. Engaging as Venom with half HP increases the likelihood that you're going to have to use your blue shield's ability early just to survive, meaning you're not going to have it for the next engagement, which usually is the final killing engagement, meaning they're going to have to take one more soft engage one more time before they're actually going to be able to take you out, which again is giving poke even more time to play the game. I played a lot of dive in college in Overwatch, and this was easily the hardest thing to overcome for the tanks when playing against poke. Taking too much damage before the engagement on dive kills your entire composition. How do you make yourself hard to engage on though when you are playing the poke composition? Again, the goal is to create create time for your team and know who the target for the enemy team actually is. This is where high ground comes into play. The problem is that people hold high ground like it is the sacred promised land of Marvel Rivals that was promised to them thousands of years ago, when all it really is just a solid defensive tool in this situation. Against dive, high ground is not meant to be stood on for offensive value all of the time. Instead, it is there for you to be a threat that needs to be cleared by the enemy dive team before they make their final engagement. What this does is it costs them cooldowns that they need in order to actually eliminate your team, giving your team time. So for example, let's look at a Hall of the Jolly example here. Assuming your team is playing on point covering the main angle in ranked that they usually default to, you have options assuming you are playing a character like Hela or Phoenix. In position 1, if the enemy commits on you, you can just fly over to the position 3 or back to your team while trading with the people that dove you, possibly finding a pick. Position 2 gives you a spot further away from the enemy team if they engage on player 1 first. Finally, position 3 gives you a health pack to play off of that also routes back to your team to possibly isolate a 2v1 if a teammate is there to support you. The key here though is that you have to be efficient with your duel while you are walking back to your team to force out more cooldowns from the enemy team, giving your team more time to make the enemy tanks weaker for the actual engagement. In the current state of the game, it can actually be really difficult to do this with how strong some of the divers are right now in the game, but that is the whole theory around playing poke into dive. Unlike the other two compositions though, poke is much less about macro setup and is way more about simply taking a solid off angle and shooting better than the enemy team. It is way more about mechanics than it is about brain power. So me yapping at you only really goes so far. So let's review two fights from a pro scrim where poke was being played to visualize this concept even better and possibly set up easier shots for ourselves. So as I was trying to find VODs, it was actually a little bit difficult to find them at this current moment in time because in Ignite, a lot of teams are running dive, and dive is just really strong at taking away poke angles, which is really good if you didn't like poke slop for all these different seasons. That being said, I still did find a scrim code from, I believe this is tournament prep for the tournament that Aramori is trying to get going. I don't know too much about it, but I do know it's going to be a very exciting tournament, and there's a lot of really good players that are actually playing in this that, you know, maybe aren't like pro players, but are very strong players that play ranked and definitely are pretty good at these characters when, you know, the Ignite bans aren't being used. As you can see, these are MRC bans, so maybe poke is still pretty strong in this scenario. So as we can see here, we got Emily at that. This was someone that I knew from Overwatch. SK, everyone knows SK, and a lot of other players I'm not too familiar with, but at the same time, they were all very good players by what I have seen so far. So what I want to show you guys is pretty much in a poke meta, you know, how setting up your composition is actually so important, even when you're playing against really strong players, even when you're going against SK, who, guys, SK is a really good player. I have a lot of respect for her as a player, 100%. But as you can see here on blue team, they are going to be the winning team in this engagement. As you can see, they're playing a poke composition with Helena Moore, and they have a White Fox attached to the hip of the Hela here on an off angle that's going to be very difficult for them to, the red team, to actually respond to. As you can see, Angela's going to try to come over here, but it's not going to be very easy for her to stop a Hela, as compared to if the Hela was alone, the Angela would probably win that 1v1. With the White Fox, the Angela can't really do anything. And then this Emma has two different angles that she has to worry about. She has to worry about the Hela that's on the left, but she also has to worry about the entire team and the Namor that's on the right. So this is the basic setup of poke that, you know, it's very simple to pull off, but a lot of people don't think about it, and that's why they end up inevitably failing in comp. So as you can see here, just from like a bird's eye view, you can kind of see how there's two lines of fire, and it just looks so overwhelming for red team to deal with, to the point where they're just scared to really just frankly leave spawn. Very simple stuff here though. Immediately what's going to happen is the Emma, without a whole lot of like help from her team, is going to have to get a bunch of cooldowns to keep her alive, and is eventually just going to fall to all of the pressure in due time with poke. It's only a matter of time, and all of the space that red wants to take is just very hard for them to take because there's so much pressure from different angles, and they really can't react to it. Furthermore, what we actually see is Sylph from red team is going to try to actually take the 1v1 with this Hela, but it's not a 1v1 at all. And then what ends up happening is, you know, it maybe looks like you're getting support on the Hela here, but the thing is this Hela is getting active support from the White Fox, which makes it really, really easy for for this Hela to just pretty much take a duel with whoever she may please to do so. And as you can see, when only one person is trying to actually deal with this off angle alone, it makes this other core, you know, have a lot more pressure on this Emma. The Emma dies, and then the Namor no longer has a safe 1v1 that is on even footing as the blue Hela here. It's very difficult for the red team to play if they do not play in this very specific way with like 2 different groups of players together. If Kissy on the Invisible Woman goes with Self here and gives an Invisible Woman shield to the Hela, it's going to be way easier for them to actually perform and make something happen. And I just don't think you can actually take the mag over here and really push for this unless everyone is going to go for that. So as you can see, a very simple setup, just having one support with the Hela and just playing for time, playing to shoot and not take too much damage on the front line is key to this composition's success on the blue team. And it was just very easy for them to win pretty much this entire first point and just hold. Red team only got 1, 2, 3 picks on blue, even with all of these really solid players. And as you're learning with a new team, macro isn't going to be the very first thing. It's just going to be, you know, getting some experience with each other here. And as we can see, I mean, I think both of these teams are going to perform pretty well in an Armorious tournament. Let's look at one more VOD possibly from this map to see if there's anything else we can get, maybe from setting up like poke on offense. All right, so for offense, I wanted to show you guys how a poke composition could work and how you can be very aggressive with this composition if you get value early. Now, you can look at the compositions here. Yes, there's a White Fox. Yes, there's a Mantis and a Widow. But just the way that you play the macro, even characters that maybe just aren't the best, like Widow, you can still make these characters work really well. And it actually kind of shows how Mantis can be this kind of like poke support, but doesn't have to be as active alongside that off angle as maybe an Invisible Woman or a White Fox would have to be. And I want to show you guys just honestly how crazy this Widow is and how you can maybe set this up on offense. So as you can see out of the spawn doors, what might look like this Widow is alone gets a damage boost and gets a little bit of help from the Mantis and just immediately just absolute, I'm going to be honest, this was cold, like absolutely dunks on the Hela here. And stuff like this, I mean, this is damn, like I ain't gonna lie, like damn, this is just what poke looks like in Marvel Rivals when you play aggressively, and that's just like, it's the it's what puts the shooter in a game like Rivals is what poke is. So if you get big value like that, how can we then, you know, push our advantage with taking all these angles? First off, you can just immediately run into the backline, and we'll go back and then see how like red team could have played their poke composition a little bit better. You can immediately just take an angle like this. And this is actually not bad at all when you're playing Widow, because she is a poke hero in a way that has so much mobility that, you know, taking these deeper off angles and almost flanks is actually way more serviceable and doable because you have like consistent mobility, almost like you're playing Soldier 76 from Overwatch. So this isn't even a bad angle for the Widow here. Instantly just gonna be able to put so much pressure on this enemy team as they're backing up. As the Hela, we'll see where the Hela is. On blue team, it's just going to be playing with the core, taking not even that much of an off angle, but much more of an active angle with this White Fox, as this angle is being held from Widow. As this Widow angle doesn't look as promising anymore, where does the Widow go? Again, takes another off angle and just keeps pincering the enemy team in between 2 angles with the Hela and the Black Widow. Now, she does go over here in main just because it's easier to hit shots and we're just cleaning up at this point. But I think it would have been better for the Widow to possibly just stand up here and just stay patient and just kill these supports as they're running out instead of having like 2 different angles, because there's a world where maybe they can play a little bit better on red and like move to a position when they see that this angle isn't being utilized. But that's like some pretty min-maxy stuff from red, and I just don't quite frankly expect players to be doing that all the time unless they're getting paid to play literally 16 hours a day, in which these players are not. But that would have been what I would do if I wanted to continuously like put on the pressure with a poke comp on offense. And honestly, the Widow did a really good job of that. You're getting an instant pick with your support from the Mantis immediately, and then you just keep taking more hard off angles to the point where they're pretty much just flanks with your advantage, and you're always pincering the enemy team between one angle, which is your Hela, and one angle, which is you on Black Widow. Now, I do want to review one thing from red team rather, to see like maybe why did it go wrong? Like, why did the Hela die so quickly? Was there something that we could have done to make it easier for our Hela to succeed? So as you can see here, the problem with red team, again, is that we're not really actively supporting this Hela with an Invisible Woman shield. We're immediately rotating it away, and we're not exactly playing with her because this core, as you can see, isn't really taking enough damage to warrant that 2 supports are sitting on top of each other in Marvel Rivals helping the people out. These tanks should be fine in this scenario because ideally they're playing around cover and not taking too much damage. if we had an invisible woman shield the entire time on this Hela, as you can see, we get it from the start, but then we immediately rotate it away. It's impossible for this player to play the game. It's very difficult for this Hela to win against a damage boosted Widow with a Mantis Pocket alongside her who's going to body shot to make this a one-shot kill. It's just very difficult for this player to win that duel into the Widow. Imagine though, if the invisible woman was standing right next to the Hela here, puts a shield on the Hela, and then pulls this Widow in when the Widow gets a little bit too confident and walks forward. Then this Widow dies, and you can continuously defend against this blue team for far longer until somebody makes a mistake. So as you can see, while this composition, even from this very simple overview of a VOD, from looking at this composition, it may look like a lot of it is just point, click, shoot better. And honestly, 75% of the composition is just pressing your cooldowns better. I'm not gonna lie to you. But that extra 25% at a very high level is what allows you to take those extra 3 shots on Hela to possibly win these duels against a damage boosted Widow, to make your life a lot easier. And it all comes down from, okay, what can supports be doing? How can tanks be taking less damage so that our supports have more time to actually help our DPS, to create more time for them to shoot for longer. So I hope all of this makes, you know, poke slop maybe seem like less of a slop composition and more of something that's like, okay, yes, it does just come down to shooting the enemies better, but are there things that I can do on every single role to make them have an easier time just shooting for longer? So I hope this all helps, and we'll finish out the video. Now that we have made it this far in the guide, understand that poke is a composition that requires precise execution on the mechanical front and puts the shooter in third-person shooter for Marvel Rivals as a game. Taking solid off angles that are split from the main core of your team but are safe sets up easier shots that you can take for an extended period of time. Sometimes when the fight starts to look lost, making a play by going on a flank is necessary to try to salvage the fight. Flanks can become aggressive off angles though if they are done with multiple players to support the range that you're really going for. Against brawl compositions, kiting the enemy's main engagement while another DPS is being aggressive on their rotation is key to the success of your team. On the other side, against dive, whittling down the enemy's HP before they engage forces out their cooldowns and gives you more time to find a pick. With this understanding of poke, you may not be the best Hela in the entire world hitting every single shot, but you will find a lot more success in ranked and supporting your teammates. Thank you all so much for watching. Watch the other compositions guide, and don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses for new players with unique champions that we talked about today. But until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.